The silent threat. The Corvan Empire stretched across 17 star systems, a vast dominion of technological marvels and military might. For 8 centuries, they had expanded without meaningful resistance, their superior technology and strategic brilliance crushing all opposition. Their warships, massive constructs of dark metal and pulsing energy fields, could reduce a planet's surface to molten slag within hours. Their soldiers, encased in adaptive battle armor that made them virtually invulnerable to conventional weapons, moved like unstoppable forces across whatever terrain they encountered. High Commander Vexor stood on the observation deck of the Corvan flagship Inevitable Dominion, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he studied the holographic representation of the Sol system. His scales shifted from deep purple to an amused blue-green as he focused on the 3rd planet. "This is the homeworld of the species that has been intercepting our communications," he asked, mandibles clicking with skepticism. Science Officer Telzak bowed slightly. "Yes, High Commander. The humans. They've only achieved rudimentary spaceflight, limited to their own system. Their most advanced vessels use chemical propulsion." Laughter rippled through the command deck, a chittering sound that echoed against the metallic walls. Vexor leaned closer to the hologram, his compound eyes narrowing. "And yet they managed to decode our encrypted transmissions." "A fluke, Commander," Telzak replied. "They detected our scout ships at the edge of their system 2 cycles ago. Since then, they've been attempting to establish contact." "Interesting," Vexor said. "Perhaps there is more to these creatures than appears. Prepare a first contact protocol. Let us see what these humans have to say before we claim their world." The transmissions were established within hours. The human leaders appeared on the massive view screen, small pink-skinned creatures with only 2 arms and 2 legs, clothed in formal attire that seemed primitive compared to the living metal uniforms of the Corvan officers. They spoke of peace, of cultural exchange, of mutual respect. Vexor listened patiently, then raised one of his 4 arms to silence them. "Your words are pleasant, but meaningless," he announced. "The Corvan Empire does not negotiate with lesser species. We offer you a simple choice: surrender your world and serve as labor force for our colonization efforts, or resist and be eradicated. You have 1 planetary rotation to decide." The human delegates didn't show the expected fear. There were no pleas, no angry threats. Instead, the lead diplomat, a female with short silver hair, simply nodded. "We understand," she said. "We will communicate your terms to our leaders." The transmission ended, and Vexor turned to his second-in-command, Krezek. "They are unusually composed for primitives facing extinction," he observed. Krezek's scales flickered with amusement. "Perhaps they don't fully understand their situation. Their species has never encountered a superior civilization before." "Perhaps," Vexor agreed, but something about the humans' calm demeanor troubled him. In 8 centuries of conquest, he had seen countless species face their end, some with desperate courage, others with pathetic begging. None had shown such acceptance. The planetary rotation passed, and the humans transmitted their response. "High Commander Vexor," the silver-haired diplomat addressed him directly. "After careful consideration, Earth has decided not to resist your forces. We recognize the futility of military opposition against your advanced technology. Our world will receive your landing parties without hostility." Vexor's scales darkened with suspicion. "You surrender without a single shot fired." "We are a practical species, Commander. We value survival. Fighting you would only result in unnecessary deaths." Vexor ended the transmission and turned to his officers. "Deploy the Conquest fleet, but proceed with caution. I want planetary defense systems neutralized before any landing craft approach." "High Commander," the tactical officer interjected, "our scans show minimal defensive capabilities. Their military technology is primitive. Nuclear missiles, kinetic weapons, nothing that could penetrate our shields." Nevertheless, Vexor insisted, "Follow standard protocols. These humans are too accepting of their fate. I want to know what they're hiding. The Corvin fleet moved into Earth's orbit, 5,000 warships positioning themselves in a tactical formation that would allow them to bombard the entire surface simultaneously if necessary. Smaller scout ships descended into the atmosphere, mapping population centers and military installations. High Commander, the humans are not mobilizing their forces, reported the tactical officer. Their military vessels remain in their ports. Their aircraft sit idle on runways. There appears to be no preparation for resistance whatsoever. Vexer paced the command deck, his unease growing. What are the civilians doing? Going about their daily activities, sir. Our observers report normal patterns of movement in major cities. They're behaving as if we aren't even here. It makes no sense, Krezek muttered. Even species that surrender show panic, disruption. These humans act as if our presence is irrelevant. Deploy the first wave of ground forces, Vexer ordered. Secure their major governmental centers. Let's see how irrelevant they find us when we're walking their streets. The first Corvin dropships descended toward Washington, Beijing, Moscow, and other capital cities. Each carried 300 elite soldiers, more than enough to secure any primitive government institution. Vexer watched from the command deck as the operation commenced, expecting that now, finally, the humans would show their true reaction. The dropships entered Earth's atmosphere without incident. No missiles rose to meet them. No aircraft attempted interception. The tactical display showed them approaching their targets unimpeded. And then they vanished. Not one dropship. Not two. All of them, simultaneously, disappeared from their sensors. What happened? Vexer demanded, his scales flashing alarmed red. Unknown, High Commander. The sensor officer frantically worked his console. They were there, and then, nothing. No debris, no energy signatures. They're simply gone. Communication? None, sir. Complete silence from all deployed forces. Before Vexer could issue new orders, the view screen activated. The silver-haired human diplomat appeared, but now she was dressed differently. A form-fitting uniform of matte black material, with subtle insignias that hadn't been present before. High Commander Vexer, she said, her tone no longer diplomatic but coldly professional. I am General Diana Chen of the Earth Defense Coalition. I regret to inform you that your landing forces have been neutralized. Vexer's mandibles clicked furiously. What have you done? Something you believed impossible for primitives like us, Chen replied. Your dropships and all personnel aboard have been quantum displaced. In simple terms, they now exist in a parallel dimensional space, close enough that we can observe them, but physically unreachable from our universe. Impossible, Krezek shouted. No species possesses such technology. None that you've encountered before, Chen agreed. Humanity has chosen to develop science along different paths than the Corvin Empire. While you perfected faster-than-light travel and energy weapons, we explored the boundaries between dimensions. Vexer fought to maintain his composure. You claim to have this technology, yet you live confined to a single planet. You use chemical rockets. Your communications are primitive. Appearances can be deceiving, Commander. We learned long ago that advertising advanced technology attracts unwanted attention. Like yours. Chen's expression hardened. We've studied your empire for decades. We intercepted your communications not by accident, but through targeted quantum resonance scanning. We know your strengths, your weaknesses, and your tactical doctrines. If what you say is true, Vexer said, his voice dangerously quiet, then you know we can reduce your planet to molten rock with a single command. You could try, Chen acknowledged. But before your weapons fire, I should warn you, the quantum displacement field is now expanding. It will reach your orbital position in approximately 3 minutes. Vexer turned to his tactical officer, who nodded in confirmation. Sensors were detecting an unknown energy field rising from Earth's surface, expanding outward at an exponential rate. Full retreat, Vexer ordered. All ships, maximum thrust. Get beyond the orbit of their moon. The Corvin fleet, for the first time in its 8th century history, turned and fled. But it was too late for many. As the mysterious field expanded, ship after ship simply vanished from space, displaced to a dimension where they would float for eternity, their crews forever trapped in a parallel hell. By the time the field stabilized, the Corvan Empire had lost over 2,000 warships, nearly half their invasion force, and humanity had not fired a single conventional weapon. The game had changed. The predator had become the prey. Ashes of arrogance. The remaining Corvan ships regrouped at the edge of the Sol system, their formations ragged and disorganized. Inside the inevitable dominion, chaos reigned. Officers shouted contradictory orders, sensor technicians frantically tried to locate their missing ships, and High Commander Vexer stood in stunned silence, watching as his invincible armada crumbled before an enemy that had not even bothered to build proper warships. 2,117 vessels lost, Krezak reported, his voice hollow. No debris, no energy signatures, as if they never existed. The humans, Vexer finally spoke, his scales a dull gray of shock. They let us come. They waited until we were committed. They wanted us to believe they were helpless. What are your orders, High Commander? Krezak asked. The question hung in the air. For the first time in his long career, Vexer faced an enemy he didn't understand, one that had neutralized half his fleet without firing a shot. The logical move would be retreat, to return to Corvan space and regroup, to analyze what had happened and develop countermeasures. But retreat meant acknowledging defeat. It meant returning to the Emperor as a failure. It meant the end of his career, possibly his life. Prepare all remaining ships for full-scale bombardment, Vexer commanded. Target every major population center on the planet. We will strike simultaneously, overwhelming whatever defense system they possess. Sir, the tactical officer interjected, if they can displace our ships to another dimension, what's to stop them from displacing our weapons fire as well? Their technology clearly has limitations, Vexer insisted. The field stopped expanding. It has a finite range and capacity. If we saturate their defenses with enough firepower, something will get through. The order went out. The remaining Corvan ships positioned themselves just beyond the range of the quantum displacement field, their weapon systems powering to maximum capacity. At Vexer's command, they fired. Thousands of energy beams and plasma torpedoes streaking toward Earth in a deadly barrage that would turn continents to ash. The weapons never reached their targets. Halfway to Earth, they simply ceased to exist, vanishing into the same dimensional void that had claimed the Corvan dropships. And then something new appeared on their sensors. High Commander, the sensor officer called out. Multiple objects approaching from Earth orbit. High velocity, small cross-section. Defensive screen, Vexer ordered. All ships, prepare for impact. But the approaching objects weren't missiles or energy weapons. They were small, barely larger than a Corvan soldier, and they moved at speeds that defied the laws of physics as the Corvans understood them. The objects phased through the defensive screens as if they weren't there, penetrating the hulls of Corvan ships without creating breach warnings or damage alerts. And then, Corvan warships began to die. Not with dramatic explosions or visible damage. They simply went dark, one after another, all systems failing simultaneously. Life support, weapons, propulsion, communications, everything shut down, leaving the massive vessels as lifeless husks drifting in space. What's happening? Vexer demanded, watching in horror as his fleet was systematically neutralized. Unknown, sir, a technician replied. The objects appear to be deploying some kind of nanoscale technology that's disrupting our power systems. It's spreading through the ships like an infection. Isolate all systems. Sever all internal connections. It's too late, sir. The infection is transmitted through our own power conduits. Once a ship is penetrated, complete shutdown occurs within minutes. The inevitable Dominion shuddered as one of the objects phased through its hull. Emergency lights flashed, and warning signals blared. Containment breach in sectors 7 through 12. announced the ship's automated system. Unknown contaminant detected in primary power grid. Failure cascade imminent. Vexor turned to Krezek, his scales now pale with fear. Prepare my personal shuttle. We must return to Corvin space immediately. The Emperor must be warned. About what? The new voice came from behind them, and every officer on the command deck turned in shock. A human stood there, a male with dark skin and eyes that reflected the emergency lights with an unnatural gleam. He wore no spacesuit or protective gear, just a simple uniform similar to General Chen's. How did you get aboard this vessel? Vexor demanded, instinctively reaching for his sidearm. Quantum displacement works both ways, Commander, the human explained calmly. We can remove things from your universe, or we can insert things, like myself. My name is Dr. Elijah Washington, head of Earth's Applied Quantum Sciences Division. What do you want? Vexor's hand hovered over his weapon. I wouldn't, Washington advised, nodding at the weapon. I'm not physically here in a way your weapons can affect. I'm just a projected quantum echo. The real me is safely on Earth. He walked around the command deck, examining the Corvin technology with casual interest. As for what we want, originally, we wanted nothing more than to be left alone. Your empire changed that when you threatened our extinction. If you're so powerful, Krezek challenged, why hide your capabilities? Why pretend to be primitive? Washington smiled. Humanity learned long ago that appearing harmless is an evolutionary advantage. Predators ignore what they don't consider a threat. It's given us time to develop our technology without interference from species like yours. And now? Vexor asked, aware that the ship's systems were failing around them, emergency lights dimming as power reserves depleted. Now we're going to dismantle the Corvin Empire, Washington stated matter-of-factly. Not out of vengeance, but necessity. Your civilization is built on conquest and subjugation. You represent a fundamental threat to sentient rights across this galaxy. That cannot continue. The command deck went dark, auxiliary power failing. Only the faint glow of emergency chemical lights remained, and the strange luminescence from Washington's eyes. Your ship's life support will continue functioning for approximately 2 weeks, he informed them. That should give you time to reflect on your choices. A rescue vessel from one of your subject worlds will arrive to repatriate survivors. When you return to your homeworld, deliver this message to your Emperor. The era of Corvin expansion is over. Any further attempts to conquer other worlds will be met with the complete quantum displacement of your home planet to a dimension from which there is no return. Washington's form began to fade. One final thought, Commander Vexor. The technology we used against you today is over a century old, our earliest, most primitive quantum applications. Consider what our current capabilities might be. And then he was gone, leaving the Corvin officers in near darkness. In the days that followed, as the powerless, inevitable Dominion drifted through space, Vexor had ample time to contemplate the Empire's miscalculation. They had encountered hundreds of species, conquered 17 star systems, and never once considered that their understanding of physics, of what was possible, might be fundamentally limited. The humans hadn't just defeated them. They had operated on a plane of existence the Corvins hadn't known was real. They had reached into the fabric of reality itself and reshaped it to their will. When the rescue ship finally arrived, not a proud Corvin vessel, but a humble transport from one of their subject worlds, Vexor and his surviving crew boarded in silence. Their empire of conquest, built over 8 centuries of military dominance, had been broken in a single day by a species they had dismissed as primitives. As the transport pulled away from the lifeless husk of the once mighty flagship, Vexor gazed out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other empires and federations were going about their business, unaware that everything had changed. Humanity had revealed itself, stepping onto the galactic stage, not as another struggling young species, but as a power that could bend reality itself. The Corvin Empire would adapt or perish, and Vexor suspected many other civilizations would soon face the same choice. The age of arrogance was over. The age of humanity had begun.